And to be honest, this is not unlike life. And what I mean by that is this: some of the best advantages and opportunities you're ever going to come across in life is going to people of influence that you respect and asking them for advice, right? How many times have you heard of successful people saying, I asked for this person's advice, but really it turned into an opportunity to work for them at their organization? This is not any different. If you have an MVP, now this is the question, and we don't have that in the question here, but are you trying to address and build a rapport with that enterprise to be a paying customer and get a POC? Or are you trying, because you've got an MVP and you're still trying to scale it and you need design partners? Either way, it depends on also who you're approaching. If you're approaching somebody on the IT team who could be a mentor and coach to you, your solution, to get it to be Fortune 500 ready from MVP status, and then they could be your champion on the buy coalition in 6 months to a year.
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Jehan Isaacs. I'm the head of growth for the Founder Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today. Those of you who have been following us on socials or have been attending our events, you know the drill. We usually bring in a couple awesome speakers and subject matter experts throughout the week to help educate early stage founders, investors, and mentors about some of the best practices. Today, we have an awesome speaker lined up. His name is Thomas DelVecchio. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But before I let him self-introduce himself, today we're going to be talking about everything around enterprise sales, just having a good Q&A with me and Tom. Unfortunately, his video is not working, but you'll be able to hear him, so we'll still get the conversation going, and then hopefully you can still get some decent insights on it. Before we kind of kick things off, let me go through some housekeeping. The first thing is, as you can see, this platform is called AirMeet. There's a few things you need to know. On the right-hand side, there are a bunch of, there's a chat button. Please use that to communicate with each other. Underneath that, there's a Q&A function. Please use that to feed me questions. I'll take some towards the end and I'll feed them to Tom. And then at the bottom of the screen, there's some emojis. If you feel like there's something that resonates with you, click an emoji, show the love type of thing. Yeah, I think that's about it. If you're, the experience in AirMeet is a little bit clunky on mobile, try to be on a desktop or laptop if possible. Okay, that being said, super excited to get today's topic started, which is like a subject that's very dear to me personally, which is all about enterprise sales and just educating founders about kind of that sales process, on how to prospect and how to close deals and how to kind of do that upsell and cross-sell motion. With that being said, maybe Tom, do you want to self-introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. No, first off, thank you for having me on, and thank you to Founder Institute. I apologize to everybody in advance. I'm here in New York, and we're in the midst of a nor'easter, so I think there might be a little bit of a bandwidth issue and my camera's not working. So I apologize for that, but hopefully I'm coming in clear. To go into, to introduce myself, to give you some context. My name is Tom DelVecchio. I'm 50 years old. I live in New York, and I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I've started multiple businesses, largely in the technology space, data space. Most recently, I started a enterprise SaaS acceleration program called Fc Centripetal, which stands for Centripetal Force. But prior to the last 2 years of doing that, I was the founder of ETR, also known as Enterprise Technology Research, which was a technology market research firm and data service. So I started that business in about 2009. And what we would do is we'd survey about 3,000 of the largest chief technology and chief information officers in the world, pretty much the global 2,000 and US federal agencies, ask them about what their spending intentions are forward looking on technologies, tracking about 500 different technology companies, from as large as Microsoft to as small as a pre-Series A name. And what we were trying to do is identify where trends were going through that data. We did something no one had ever done before, because myself as a kind of a data scientist by trade and my team, what we would do is we would take the data and map the data to look at trends over time. So what we could actually do is by building a linear regression algorithm, we're able to map the historical data over a decade and say, based on the relationship of the data for, let's say, Microsoft, we can see that the most recent data shows that Microsoft is going to beat expectations on Wall Street by 5%. And so that would let a lot of the people, and that's how we monetize. That would allow a lot of people in the venture, hedge fund, and mutual fund industry. They would use that as a useful data point. So they were biggest the biggest procurers of the research. So we would produce the research by surveying 3,500 CIOs and CTOs. They would do this because they wanted the data back for free and have access to our data visualization dashboard, which they would use for IT procurement and peer benchmarking. And then we would monetize by selling the same platform to hedge funds, venture firms, and mutual funds. So that was a fun process. It was 10 years. I took it from my idea and an intern to about 10 million in ARR over 10 years, from about 0 people to just under 40. We did one capital raise, a Series A, about halfway through. We raised a little over, I believe, $5 million at a $70 million pre-money valuation, which was pretty much led by some very notable kind of tech luminaries in the space who I won't call out now, but kind of household name people in the enterprise tech space. Uh, but, and this is something a lot of the people on the phone will probably, and the call will understand, post doing the Series A, I found that my life was very different on a day-to-day basis. I went from being a kind of 0 to 1, stand it up and build it, product, marketing, sales, and researcher who did the work with the teams every day, to really being an operator and somebody managing a board and a board's expectations. And I did not care for the latter. And I realized that I was much more of a founder than I was an operator, to boil it down. So, at that point, this was just at the end of 2009, early 2020. I, in agreement with the board, decided to leave the company. And this was just prior to the pandemic by coincidence. Stayed on another year for the board as a board member, but was no longer the acting CEO. And then I took some time off, as would be natural for a lot of people after 15 years of technology market research and scaling a company. And also per my separation agreement, of course, because I couldn't compete. And that's when I started with FC Centripetal, which is what I'm doing now, which is really just trying to support enterprise focused founders. For me, I found a gap in the space, and I always think like a product person first. And while I love the Y Combinators, I really do. They're wonderful. And the 500 startups, I wouldn't say they naturally and automatically address the enterprise issue. uh, and the enterprise founder is a different founder. The enterprise founder typically skews older. The enterprise founder is usually working on a very complex, deep-rooted problem. They understand that it takes a great deal of time and energy to even get one contract, and it takes a massive amount of compliance to even build a product that can be evaluated. This is not 25-year-olds in the garage. So a lot of that kind of business out of a briefcase startup model doesn't work. And what we felt was most meaningful, especially with what occurred over the last few years with the venture drying up, with all the venture funding and the move away, what had been 20 years of growth at any cost, keep raising money, don't, that model in the venture community went to generate revenue, come back to us when you get past the barrier of early fragility, call it under 5 million in revenues. And with that, we felt like this model was really appropriate. My co-founder, I'll get into in a moment, but what we felt was, okay, let's start this experience with the ultimate end user customer. Let's build and scale product with design partners who are enterprise CTOs. Let's validate at scale by asking thousands of CIOs and CTOs if there's a real problem, how that problem should be solved. And then are they willing to meet founders who are attempting to solve their problems? And if you can create that demand and that validation, maybe there's a reason to continue to iterate and scale. So we kind of reverse engineered it by starting with the client at the beginning. But we found that it works and it resonates. So We formally started FC Centripetal about a year and a half to 2 years ago with my partner Scott O'Barry, who's a former technology, media, and telecom portfolio manager at Point 72, the famous hedge fund led by Stevie Cohen. And before that, he spent 19 years at Eminence Capital, which is another phenomenal hedge fund founded and led by Ricky Sandler. Obviously, he gets very deep into the layers, and he's dealt with everything from pre-IPO to mega caps, as well as been an activist on multiple campaigns. So, we bring a very complementary skill set to working with founders in the enterprise. He brings into it with obviously a significant business acumen and what a VC and an investor wants to see in a raise and the use of funds, building a sound financial model from day one that can be used all the way till they potentially go public or get acquired 7 years later. And I focus on, typically what a founder does. I'm more of a resource and an advocate to talk about, is that really how you want to dilute yourself? Is that how you want to build that culture? Who's going to be your first hire? How are you going to build your sales process and pipeline? How are you going to hire your development team? What are they going to be focused on? So, we have a nice complementary skill set, and we don't really see ourselves as VCs. We really see ourselves as advisors, even though we're investors. We don't want, we don't want the founders we work with to be worried about what they share with us. We're not checking in once a quarter to see how our returns are. We're really trying to be advocates and sounding boards to them on the process of raising capital, scaling company, building the roadmap. So that's a little bit about what FC Centripetal does and where I'm at now. Obviously, we sold significantly. To touch on the sales part, we had over 175 institutions as customers. These are the largest hedge funds, mutual funds, and corporates in the world, with an average ASP, right, of about 100,000 a year. We had multiple clients that were paying us over 7 figures a year in subscription, and we had multi-year agreements that renewed on an annual and biannual basis. So, we understand the long sale, we understand whale hunting, and I built sales teams, I trained sales teams, and it was a highly effective model. We were over 100% net dollar retention, 96% gross margins, and we were still growing 35 to 40% a year with 10 million ARR by, January 31st every calendar year. So hopefully that's enough context to get going.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for the details. All right, let's kick things off. Just I forgot to mention it. We have about 122 people live right now. We've had about 380 people sign up. So a bunch of people are going to get the recording. I've turned on closed caption as well, so people can kind of visually see what we're saying. But I do want to keep this kind of conversational and just talk a little bit about enterprise sales in a very let's say casual manner, just because it might be new for some people. It might be a little bit of a refresher, but I want to take it um, like all the way back, and let's just talk about enterprise sales in general. And then, if you're an early stage founder and you're doing this for the first time, it's like, hey, these are long. Like sales cycles are gonna be 6, 12, 24 months even. I know a couple of buddies of mine who were in enterprise sales to land like something like a Marriott took them 24 months, right? So, what are some of your tidbits of advices on the founders on like how they should prepare for this sales cycle? In your experience, like what should they be doing ahead of time? How do they maintain it?
Sure.
I'm sure, like, in your early days when you had just one sales rep, how were you approaching those sales cycles?
Yeah, I mean, when we were one sales rep, I was the one sales rep. So I remember how I approached it. Listen, and it's great that you said that because it's true. I literally was having a conversation yesterday with a founder that we're starting to work with now in infrastructure AI, who had a conversation with Apple, and they're probably onboarding Apple. And Apple said, "Listen, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you get this done in under 2 years, that's a win." So, like, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for a much longer sales cycle. Now, are they all going to be 2 years? Of course not. Apple's the size of the federal government. That said, it's always going to be 6 to 24 months. There's approval processes, massive amounts of negotiations, renegotiations, constant reselling. So you can't get frustrated when you explained your product 15 times and now there's a new group and a new person you have to sell your product to. because
Was
it's a
there any?
buying coalition.
Yeah, just like to jump in. Was there? Were you doing something like, let's say you spoke to an Apple? What were you doing for like those 6 months on stuff? Like you have a conversation, then you do just like wait for another 2, 3, 4 weeks, or
Yeah,
maybe
that's a
6.
great question. So, yeah, listen, and it's a very trusted kind of phrase of always be persistent but respectful. Okay, so like that's a balancing act. So, first and foremost, there's how it all begins. So maybe we step back and instead of talking about, how big the sales cycle is we talk about how it begins.
Sure.
The first thing you have to understand about enterprise is as much as this world is all now on demand through the Uberification of the world, enterprise is relationship based. And if you don't come through a trusted advisor and relationship, or you haven't built a relationship, it's extremely hard to get in cold. Extremely hard. You're not going to just email somebody who's in charge of procurement at a General Electric and get a meeting the next day and sign them. That
And
that is not how enterprise sales work. So it really starts with how you market to them, right? And I'm a big believer is that you've got to do kind of account-based selling that people refer to as ABS, which is, you need to identify, and this goes into identifying who your prospects are. You need to identify who potential buyer and champions are. And you need to identify who the buying coalition is. Because you
yeah,
got
so
to remember, sorry.
yeah, so I just want to double down on that a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the champion element around it, because I think that's really important. And then can you also just define account-based sales, because we have a lot of, like, let's say, non-sales people in the audience. So that would be helpful. Sorry to
Yeah, so
interrupt.
I'll start with the ABS. Account-based sales is one of the many, you can Google it. There's many books on it. It's one of the many approaches to account-based selling. In the enterprise, the account would be the enterprise. So if let's say you used a very large financial services firm like Citibank, there is multiple departments at Citibank. So account-based selling is kind of surrounding that whole organization and finding a different marketing angle and approach to all those different divisions and groups because something might resonate somewhere with one of them through email based or whatever type of marketing you're doing, and you want for them to potentially start connecting internally about how they're all seeing this product or feature or company, and they have different reasons for wanting to use your product or your company from different approaches, but both can be part of the buying coalition if you eventually get brought on. So you're kind of wrapping the organization around from an agnostic approach of who's there. But while you're identifying the buy coalition that way through an account-based selling approach, you're also identifying that 1 to 2 people that are going to be your champions. And these are really the people that are largely going to drive the sale actually happening internally with procurement and other divisions who are partially bought in, but they're the ones that might have that real pain point in the IT stack at the General Electric or the Citibank, and they're really going to be the driver of it. And those are the people that really typically you want to build a great relationship with if you don't have already, and you want to build relationships for the long term, because it's going to be part of their trust in you and that you're going to bring everything that needs to be brought to satiate compliance, legal, IT, and depending on what kind of solution you have, the business team, potentially the CFO's line of command, and all these different divisions that are very important within an enterprise sale. So, looking at who that buying coalition, which are the different decision makers on these divisions and groups, but having the one person that's really going to be your ally internally, because you're external, is what you're going to need. The general counsel of a corporation is not going to be your champion, right? But if you're doing something that solves the problems first and foremost for the networking department, it's probably going to be somebody leading the networking department, and maybe not even the CTO, right? So
Gotcha.
you've got to think of it that way. And it's important to identify them, because if you don't take care of them, if you're not persistent with them, if the squeaky wheel gets the oil, that's very true. So you've got to make an approach. You've got to use, and listen, I understand for founders, it's very difficult to afford different third-party software to run their day-to-day. But, even if it is an Excel program and a Google Calendar, you can set up prompts to reach back out to somebody every 7 to 10 days. It doesn't have
Uh,
to be through Salesforce, which is very expensive. It
got
can
it.
be through an Excel.
Yeah,
And
got it.
so, you need to go into it knowing that you need to identify the right people that are going to be your point person, that are going to drive for you. You need to identify who they need to sell into. You need to identify their needs. You need to sell to all of them in different ways with different emails and different one pagers in literature. And you have to have different parts of your website that speak to these different groups, whether it be the GC or compliance or the head of networking or the chief infrastructure officer or the chief information security officer. And you got to understand that there's not going to be a magic bullet that this gets done in 3 months. But if you
Right.
have centers of influence, which is kind of how we see ourselves at FC Centripetal, we're a center of influence. And so when I say, I like this company, I've evaluated this company, we put this company through our due diligence with our 3,000 CIOs and our proprietary process. And this is why I'm bringing it to you, Joe Smith at Citibank. There's a lot of layers cut through there.
Yeah,
And that's
let me
to
just jump
go
in here.
ahead.
I just want to quickly summarize today, just so people are capturing this. This is great, by the way. So first is let's like for enterprise sales, identifying the right accounts. This to your point, whether that's Citibank, Apple, whichever. The second one is identifying the right stakeholders and champions within it, right? And kind of trying to get a meeting with them and try to identify what are their pains and problems and solutions, and then presenting your solution type of thing. And then you're doing that rigorous follow up for that 6 to 12 months, right? Um, so that's kind of the first that first kind of layer, if you wish, or the first few activities. And now you've kind of started this enterprise sales motion. What I wanted to kind of get your
Can I
two
add
cents.
something to that?
Yeah, sure.
I think it's very important that people understand that juxtaposed to what you just said, there's also the strategic and tactical approach to communications. Because we're talking about getting a meeting like it's a throwaway sentence, and it's not, right? Getting the first meeting can take forever, right?
Yeah,
And we
that's
live in a
yeah.
world of spam filters and email blockers and EAs that don't let you call people directly anymore. So, there's
Yeah.
very little subtle things that you can do. Obviously, I think you all know about creating content, posting regularly at the right times on LinkedIn and otherwise. That all goes without saying. Going to conferences where you're going to meet a lot of people in foot traffic that are in your space, even if you're not paying for the conference. You can pay for the day pass and attend RSA in San Francisco and walk around and meet people. And you can meet hundreds of people like that over 2 to 3 days that are at an RSA conference by just paying for $100 attendee pass or
Yeah.
virtual. But also when you do your communications, don't email people on Mondays. Don't be silly. Know what time zone people are in. Email them at the time that works for them, not for you, right? Don't email people at the top of the hour. Everybody's going into a meeting at the top of the hour. Email them with 10 minutes to go. Email them at 10:50. It might hit their inbox when they're catching up on their email after being in a 45-minute meeting. And they're going to read it and they're going to see it. Make a good subject line. Create good hidden preview text. Don't try to solve war and peace in your email. 3 to 4 sentences with a call to action, and be friendly, be humorous, don't be so dry. Bring a smile to somebody's face, and you've got a much better chance that if it comes at the right time with the right subject about a topic they care about, they'll at least respond to you to let you know they're the wrong person, but you should be emailing Lisa or whoever the right person is. So I just want to make sure we said that.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's pretty much prospecting 101 in like 3 minutes. So I think we did cover this in a couple other webinars. So we do have some content around it, but it's always good to revisit and surface it. You are right. Getting the first meeting with any enterprise or any B2B organization is very challenging, especially in 2024 and 2025, right? Considering, I do want to cover the whole enterprise sales cycle because I think that's not spoken about too much, right? So, like, we talked a little bit about the prospecting side, getting the champion, engaging the champion, trying to get the first meeting and kind of go from there. Where does where do you kind of go from there? Like, you
You
know,
got to map it.
yeah, like I was literally just talking to a founder this morning, and he's like, "Yeah, we want to do enterprise, and we're really struggling with this, and we're figuring this out." I'm like, "Hey, like to your point, let's map it." But like even before you map it, I was like, "You probably need to present you need to do a ridiculous amount of research and go to the account saying like, hey, I've already looked at your account A to Z. I've looked at your company. I've looked at the public information. I've done some secret shopping. I've signed up for your newsletter. I've invested 5 hours into this account, and I've identified all these things which I think I could help with, right? So like it's essentially building that use case out and going to that to your potential champion and be like, hey, this is like everything you need to know. Distribute this internally. My name is Zehan. I think I can help you with 1, 2, and 3. And then that kickstarts a 6 months kind of cycle. But what I do want to talk about is like POCs. We had one guy last year talk about this in a bit more detail. But I think it's not enough. Like, you know, our job at FI is always to educate. So I think like, do you want to maybe talk about securing a POC with an enterprise and how do you even go about it? Like, like is it like when do you when do you actually like approach it? It's like, hey, like let's say you present the use case, everyone says, yeah, this looks great. This looks like we should put this on the roadmap, and then like do you go straight like, okay, let's do a POC, or is it something you need to keep nurturing towards? Because I know a lot of people who say they get a POC and then sometimes it becomes free or they fall through, and there's a lot of stuff that goes south pretty fast. So I'd love to get your 2 cents on
Yeah,
how did you navigate the whole POC landscape? When did you suggest it? How did you execute it? Like,
sure. I mean, so right now, I mean, I do this more now probably than ever because part of our process is getting, in the FC process is, we're bringing founders and their solutions weekly through our proprietary process to our network of 3,000 CIOs, and we're identifying who's interested. And then once they actually do speak and do a product preview, it's all about really getting to the paid for POC or proof of concept. So first and foremost, when you think about proof of concepts or pilot projects,
sorry.
it goes back to the old,
Sorry, Tommy. You briefly said it. You said paid POC. Can you?
sure.
Why is the POC paid versus unpaid? Like, can you elaborate?
Well, you should always go for a paid proof of concept. A proof of concept, you don't want to be doing anything for free. And most people understand if it's an actual true solution and vendor that solves a pain point and it needs to be supported. I mean, so keep in mind, at the enterprise level, then one of the largest distinctions you're going to see up front, if you've ever sold to small market businesses, the SMB, or the mid-side enterprise, the MSE, the biggest part is you need a legitimate sales support engine, right? You need sales engineers, right? And that can be the founder, that can be the CTO, but you need to be able to support an enterprise. They need to believe that can be supported. You're not going to just ship them a container and they're going to deploy it and be like, thank you very much. That's not how the enterprise works. They expect the vendor to come in and be a partner and a trusted resource, unless you're going through a VAR or a value-added reseller, which is unlikely with the largest of enterprises who don't buy from VARs, they buy direct. They're going to expect you to have people, including maybe the founder or the CTO, be able to help them implement. And there's no more larger emphasis on implementation than the POC, the proof of concept. To do that while you're in the startup or pre-series A range is financially not feasible. It
That
costs money. So
that
you
makes
don't
sense.
have to make a margin, but you have to be very transparent. So to me, again, you were saying before, like, where does this start? I don't believe in mapping out the buying process. I believe the proof of concept is part of the buying process. So I believe you need to start mapping even the POC. Once you've identified the champion and you've identified the buying coalition, what you can then do is speak with your champion and say, forget if let's say you're a cybersecurity solution. Forget if your CISO is going to agree to this. Forget if they think it's compelling. You think it's compelling and you're on the security team. You're, 2 steps down, let's say, from the CISO at a large enterprise. And you are interested in my product, and we've built a rapport over a couple of Zooms and email. I need to understand your organization's approval process, budget cycle, and pain point. I understand my solution solves your pain point, but from the overall security suite and all the endpoints that need to be protected, where does this stand in the overall pain point priorities? And then you can start mapping out how you actually get POCs done at their organization. So they'll explain it to you, and that's the easiest thing for them to do. It's very easy to be very transparent that, this is a large pain point for everybody. It's not just me. I'm speaking for the organization, just not my day-to-day functions. We've brought other vendors in. It hasn't worked. We're still using, this massive vendor who has a solution, but it's really out of date. It might even go EOL, end of life, and we're going to be sitting there unprotected. So, we're looking at solutions this year, and you're part of that eval process. Great.
Gotcha.
So that's the first point. So now I know where I stand. So what are the steps to get a proof of concept approved? And they will tell you. And you can, of course, if they don't know, that's a problem. You want to be dealing with somebody who knows that. But what you want to demonstrate to them is tangible ROI, return on investment, and speak
Yeah.
their language. Talk about potentially revenue growth or risk mitigation, operational efficiency, uh, cost reduction through the avoidance of
You want
ransomware.
yeah, just to jump in there, you kind of want to hit their KPIs and goals, right? Like if you've done a discovery and you've asked the right questions up ahead, and that person says, "Hey, I really want to solve problems one and two, and this is the metric I need to hit to show my stakeholders, to show my boss," that's the metric you want to optimize for, right? And most of the time, it's either people want to save money or make money, or save time is kind of the direction that you want to kind of push people towards, right? Just to add it in there. And I think that makes a big difference when a founder goes and be like, hey, this is how we're going to help you solve your problem. And these are the metrics we're measuring, right? And then again, the documentation here is key because whatever you say and present will probably be distributed to like 10 different people internally, right? Until you get like everybody in the same room.
Correct.
Um,
And many proofs of concept, let's keep something in mind. Many proofs of concept are done in a very small, sequestered area, right? They're going to deploy to 300 users. A proof of
yeah,
concept is not going to be 5,000 end users and employees of, Hewlett Packard. It's going to start
yeah,
with a few hundred, probably near and dear to your champion's department. And using case studies and, again, tangible ROI use cases, you're going to be able to, they're going to say, okay, you're costing blank, you're making nothing on this. We're basically covering your pilot project here at here. We want to use you instead of a skunkworks we built. Okay, and that's how you get them to agree. Obviously, you're still going to go through some compliance and legal, but at the end of the day, it's going to be much more limited because it's a proof of concept. It's not
sure.
being rolled out across the enterprise.
What would you say is okay? Just I'm cognizant of time here as well, just because we started a bit late, and I do want to get to a couple questions. So
Sure.
we talked about prospecting. We talked about getting the first few meetings, proof of concept. What is the natural next step from a POC? Is it going straight into like a licensing deal? And like I think what will be helpful is like for a lot of founders, they don't realize like I think they're used to like that whole like B2B SaaS where a subscription like $9 a month, $20 a month, like $1,000 a month versus enterprise licensing deals is still a thing. And if you acquire that as a founder, it's equivalent to gold because then VCs are like, yo, like this is like they have a contract that's worth a significant amount of like it has tangible value, right? So like can you just talk to a little bit about the licensing portion of like let's say a POC goes well, what's next?
Well, you have to understand how that enterprise works. So every enterprise is slightly different. But what the one thing everybody needs to understand about the enterprise, if they don't already, is if there isn't enough security on the enterprise's side with regards to liability, there's nothing moving forward. And what that would mean, an example of that would be if an enterprise is thinking about using some outsourced cloud, they're doing a hybrid cloud strategy and they're going to put something into the public cloud. or a public cloud that's going to stand up a private cloud for them, but it wasn't built internally, there's going to be a contract in place. And that contract in place is going to talk about who's at liability for downtime.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of early stage companies can't take that liability of that cost, that there's going to be downtime for an enterprise. I mean, if you like, everybody talks about AWS and Azure from Microsoft, but if you look at the Fortune 100, the biggest of the big enterprises, a lot of them actually use IBM and software. And they do that because IBM has the wherewithal to take on that liability,
Hmm.
which Azure and AWS won't take on. So that, the bigger when you go from global 2000 all the way up to Fortune 100 and federal US agency, you're talking about a certain level of where the contractual terms and liability and downtime become almost, start and stop if you've ever got an opportunity. And it won't go anywhere. You won't get anywhere near or past a POC without having those in place. So let's put that aside. I also believe, to going back to the mapping, while you're mapping and figuring out how to get the POC, once you actually are able to get the POC and you're working towards those KPIs in the actual, call it pilot project of this 6 month to a year POC, you need to find out like who those champions are, who those blockers internally are, who those influencers are, and you've got to be hitting what matters to them. We can call them KPIs, but you
Yeah.
have to also understand what their mode is.
It's
You're
like
not going to
KPIs goals.
convince, sorry,
It's like KPIs and goals, right? It's not just
correct. And not only that, you need to understand their mode of business. What do I mean by that? Their engagement model. You are not going to change an enterprise's mode of engaging. There's way too much inertia there, right? This is not, you're not talking to a 5-person shop with the like, we don't typically do it that way. But in your case, that's not going to happen with an enterprise. So you have to be asking these people that are these valued, trusted resources internally, what does your licenses look like? What do you prefer? And there's different gives and takes in there that are really important. Some people, depending on what kind of a solution you're selling, and this is much more of a more common contemporary issue we've seen in the last few years, is they want credits back for non-usage over potentially a quarter, right? Where everything's usage based and I'm not using it the way we thought we were using it. So we're going to get credit backs and that's going to go to next quarter, because otherwise I'm going to have an unfulfilled contract that I want to cancel. So if you can be flexible with usage and credit, that goes a huge way. Liability is another one, though that's usually a big problem for startups because they can't afford offsetting downtime and other liabilities for a large enterprise. When there's an issue, it's a big cost, and small companies can fold under that kinds of pressure. But they'll also understand if they like 2-year agreements. Do they like 1-year agreements? Do they want auto renewals? Do they want non-auto renewals? All of these things matter, but you can learn all of these from the people you're doing the POC from. So while you're essentially your customer success, which again could be your CEO, your customer success or salesperson, and your CTO and or development team is implementing and making sure that you have a successful proof of concept internally on the pilot project, you're also learning how does that convert into a license agreement, right? An ELA, an SLA. And so you just have to ask that and learn that. And that again is another new discovery process. And you go through that discovery chip, that part of the gauntlet that is signing an enterprise, and say, listen, if there's paperwork, I want to look at it now. Get in advance. I know we're day 2 of the proof of concept, but I know I can never be a real vendor to you if I don't fully understand your ELA agreements. And I know you're not going to use my ELA agreements. So let me see yours. It's like you don't write a term sheet for your venture partner. You talk about what you do and you hope your venture capitalist tables a term sheet to you. You don't waste time writing your own. It's the
yeah.
same idea.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. All right, so we still have about 110 people logged in. I want to do a couple questions and then maybe we'll break out for the networking tables. So you have about 10 minutes or so, or do you have to hop off on the hour?
you talking to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have to hop off on the hour?
Uh, a roundabout. I can stretch it a little, but I can hang on.
Okay, cool. Let's do maybe a few questions and I'll break out for networking because I definitely want you to meet some of the audience members as well. But we have a
Love
few, so
to.
folks, yeah, throw it in the Q&A section. I'm going to try to do this. I like this question. You briefly just talked about this, but Mike from, I believe from DC saying, at what point would a vendor get a client to sign a master agreement or statement of work? So I think you briefly answered this, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's more you'd get them to sign it at the POC, then you'd get them to sign it again at the licensing. Do you want to clarify that?
Correct. You almost, and some people do this. They actually draft a POC that can convert into an ELA, and it can convert into a license. Some large enterprises are just going to laugh you out the door if you try, but it never hurts to try because that starts the negotiation at a certain point, kind of lobbing out the first number in a negotiation, which you know is higher than you can get, but it starts where you want it to start, right? Instead of a lower number. But a lot of times, yeah, I mean, once you're going through, once you're going through, once you've got the POC, you immediately start trying to sell and convert
Yeah,
immediately because you're going with the assumed close. You got to put your sales hat back on. You're going with the assumed close that this is going to be the greatest transformational proof of concept they've ever done to their business. So let's just start looking at the contracts now. So let me see your
gotcha.
contract. My counsel might want to revise some things. You might want to add certain things. So I'm immediately pushing it, not under sign a master agreement. I'm pushing it as listen, if we're ever going to get married, we need to know more about each other. And part of that is seeing your enterprise license agreement. So let me see it now. Or if you have, and a lot, this is very true for founders, you got to fake it till you make it, and you don't have an enterprise license agreement because you can't afford to work with the great lawyers at Cooley who can draft you an amazing, right, an amazing enterprise license agreement. So you know what you do? You say, why don't you share with me your favorite enterprise license agreement? What is
Yeah,
the
that makes
ELA you guys have that you love, that you wish all your ELAs look like? Feel free to redact the vendor. Guess what? You just got your first ELA contract because
yeah,
now
and I
you
think
know they love it.
yeah, and I think most of the time the legal team will probably already have like some like template or that they use internally. So I
Correct.
don't think it's not a stretch to ask them. Okay,
No, of
let
course not.
me.
It's not a stretch. And they love hearing that you want their favorite. So legal and procurement are gonna be like, great. So this is you want to know what we like? Here it is.
Yeah, awesome. So there's two related questions. One is, I'm going to put them both up on the screen and let's try to tackle them both as a last question. So one is from Ernie out of Israel asking, what would be the best strategy to approach an enterprise when there's only a working MVP, right? So one is the
Yeah.
working MVP question. And then the other one is, question by Erasmus from Estonia asking, like, hey, we've lost a few tenders because we're a small company. How do we get that trust? So,
Okay, those are wildly different. So let's just address the first one first, if you don't mind
okay.
bringing that back up. So if we address the first one first, do you mind bringing that back up just so I don't misremember the question?
Yeah, let me just,
It was
where did I
somebody
put it?
in Israel, it looked like, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, oh, where did I put it?
Do you remember it? We can just kind of jump on it.
Uh,
Well, let me take the second one first because I kind of remember it while
yeah,
you look for the first one. So on the second one, they said they were a really small startup and they lost some customers, but they were far ahead on the product. So they had the features and it was robust, but they lost out. So how do you make that large enterprise trust you? I think that it was a gentleman or a woman from Estonia. So what I
yeah,
would
for
say
some,
to that is it's solvency. So a big problem from large enterprises, and you'll often hear them ask, they'll be like, "Are you funded?" If you don't really, if you're not willing to share, listen, you might be self-funded. If you're not willing to share how solvent you are, that you have 3 years of runway, that the team is small and you're burning very little OpEx, so you can continue to do what you're doing without large backing, and you want to share that you're having great conversations and you're about to do a round where maybe you're selling 10% of the company for an additional 5 million of capital, those give people comfort. But never underestimate yourself. If you're telling people we need your revenue and your proof of concept because the revenue from your organization is going to fund our growth, I can assure you they're not signing you as a vendor.
Awesome.
Solvency is critical. They want to make sure that you're self-funded or have visibility into being a backed company.
Yeah, and anyone who's done an enterprise RFP, they ask for audited financials, right? So like I think
Yep,
you mentally, if you're getting ready for the enterprise game, guys, like you really need to like start thinking about like every company is going to be different. Like if you're going for a
yep,
Microsoft, they want to know that you're going to be sticking on. Some governments, really big government, if you're doing government contracts, they'll ask you to put a bond up, right? So like you need to be able to prepare for that mentally
absolutely.
and financially. I
I mean,
found the
if you're
other
going for the
question.
US government, you got to be on the GSA. So you're going
Yeah,
to have to partner with a third party organization who's already on the GSA because it can take years just to get on the GSA. So you're going to end up having to do a revenue share with a pre-established vendor that's already on the GSA in the US, but it's
yeah,
worth it because it's going to cut back 3 years and a lot of expense to do so.
yeah. Perfect.
Okay, and so
Here,
here's the other question. What would be the best strategy to approach enterprise when there's only a working MVP? That's a great question. And to be honest, this is not unlike life. And what I mean by that is this: some of the best advantages and opportunities you're ever going to come across in life is going to people of influence that you respect and asking them for advice, right? How many times have you heard of successful people saying, I asked for this person's advice, but really it turned into an opportunity to work for them at their organization? This is not any different. If you have an MVP, now this is the question, and this we don't have that in the question here, but are you trying to address and build a rapport with that enterprise to be a paying customer and get a POC? Or are you trying because you've got an MVP and you're still trying to scale it and you need design partners? Either way, it depends on also who you're approaching. If you're approaching somebody on the IT team who could be a mentor and coach to you, your solution to get it to be Fortune 500 ready from MVP status. And then they could be your champion on the buy coalition in 6 months to a year. That's the way you approach it. You bring them in as a customer board advisor. So I want you to advise my or coach or mentor my company because you are my ideal user, kind of my ICP in the future, ideal customer profile. And I want you to tell me how this product needs to be sold, positioned, and who it needs to be interoperable so it can work optimally inside your enterprise. And I'm going to use your enterprise verbally. I'm not saying I'm doing a POC with you, but you'll give me those resources of how that would look at your enterprise. And I'm going to use that as a cheat sheet with 100 different enterprises in the future. So you bring them on as a mentor. And sometimes you can do that for some basis points in your company. This is not unusual. We have a document called a MAST, a mentor agreement standard template, which people use. So CIOs, CTOs, and IT professionals can work with startups. Founder Institute has a FAST, which is a right founder agreement standard template. Like, you can go right to the website on Founder Institute and download that. And it puts that in place for a certain amount of basis points. So that's one of the best ways to do it. Now, to do it as an MVP, that's a little tougher if you're going to go and knock on the door and say, hi, I have a product to sell you with an MVP. An enterprise is going to expect something to be more fully baked out. But if you can go to somebody who would say, listen, I'm coming to you because you're the best person at this enterprise to give me feedback so my MVP, which it is now, can be a ready for prime time full solution, call it beyond, be well beyond the MVP alpha beta. And then at some point, if you feel comfortable, you can introduce it to the right buying partners inside your enterprise, since I'm going to build some of the solution with you. But to just kind of straight go from I have an MVP and I'd like you to look at us as a product we want to sell to you is extraordinarily tough.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is that like, hey, once you have an MVP, use the MVP to demo, get the enterprise to pay, and co-build it with them is essentially the short kind of critical path of success. Obviously, it's not that straightforward. Look, Tom, this has been super fun. I think we need to do a part two of this because there's a lot of questions coming in. There's a lot of content and ground to cover. So I'll ping you offline and we'll figure out time to get another one of these up and running. But
Yeah,
folks, if you've had a good time, please show the love in the emojis in the chat. Follow Tom on LinkedIn, and this has been great. I want to make sure that this is valuable for everyone. I'm gonna end this session now. We're gonna break out to virtual networking. Tom, if you have a
I've
few
got so
minutes.
much dopamine going from these emojis. It's wonderful.
Awesome. There's a table with with your name on it. You can jump onto that. Folks can also do. If your table's full,
Yes.
then just jump onto another
And
table.
find me on LinkedIn and just hit the get in touch. I might not be able to read and email you today, but I'll get in touch. Give me a week. I'll get back to everybody. And if you want me to, Ion, I can kind of do an outline of what we talked about. And you can, do it as a handout with the replay for anyone who might want it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, everyone's going to get the replay, and then we'll send out follow. We'll send out the recording in the next like 24, 48 hours. But look, it's been great. I hope everyone has a good day ahead. I'm going to end this session now. I know everyone can break out for networking. We can do that for the next like 5, 10. Well, we'll leave the tables on for the next couple hours, so whoever wants to be on can be on. But I want to be respectful of Tom's time. But all right, cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Tom, and then we'll see you on the tables.
Thank you very much. Be well, everyone.